Hey everybody, I'm Nate Savage. This is Savage 5050. I'm here with my man Jay Curtis Strickland. What's going on, man?
What's up, dude?
Yeah, man. So I see you on YouTube now.
Yeah, man.
So I seen you on a Facebook group that we share.
Yeah, I've been moderating the conservative citizen for about a month now.
Okay, that's good. That's good, man. So let me ask you, do you believe in God?
I have an interesting relationship with God. I have been through quite a spiritual transformation throughout my life, and it's been a really interesting journey. I've practiced many different walks. Most recently, I was a Hare Krishna. I did that for the better part of a decade, and I I believe it's just I'm kind of like at a spiritual impasse right now, if that makes any sense.
So would you identify as a Christian or
Um, no, I don't think so. I mean, I am a theist. Like I believe in God. I've been looking into Catholicism.
Mhm.
I was baptized as a Catholic, and
Okay.
I made friends with Milo Yiannopoulos, and he's kind of talked to me about Catholicism pretty extensively. So I've been looking to go to a Catholic mass one of these days when I can roll out of bed.
I always thought where you stand religiously has a lot to do with your politics.
Yeah, and that was kind of my aversion to the right for the longest time, was the fact that there were a lot of religious associations with it, which I to this day still kind of disagree with, in that because the founding fathers wanted us to be able to have life, liberty, pursuit of happiness,
Mhm.
and First Amendment freedom to worship. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean, okay, well, we want you to just worship our God. It's the God of your perception, the God that you want to worship. And so with the 80s, there was the whole moral majority and the Christianization of conservative politics. And I think that's what is kind of off-putting to a lot of people, because conservatism is not a religious standard. It's a political system. And so I that to me was very, very obstructive. And once I was able to kind of disassociate the two, then I was able to identify and align with it.
Okay. So so your YouTube channel, what is the name of it?
Am I allowed to say it on here?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's tea and fuckery.
Okay. T and Effery. Okay. So let
Yeah.
me ask you, what exactly do you talk about on there?
Well, I had started doing Instagram videos when I was starting to have my political shift, and the whole basis of it was I was trying to make sense of everything that was going on in the world and everything
Mhm.
that was transpiring politically with the election and the protests and whatnot. So I just started putting these little IG story videos out there. And then I had a friend from North Carolina come back and say, hey, you ought to really look into doing a YouTube channel. You're pretty good at this. And I was like, okay. And so it just has kind of escalated from there. And the subjects that I talk about, it's primarily political. I mean, it's political world events, and I've also started tackling some movie reviews and some cultural things. So that's what it's primarily focused towards.
Is your channel pro-American,
What do you mean by pro-American?
pro-USA?
Yeah, I I think so. I mean, I believe in America, and I believe in the tenets of the Constitution, and I think that I think that we've kind of lost the plot here, and we've forgotten what it is to be Americans in this country. Like we think that the imposition of our beliefs and our ideas upon each other is the right way, and
Mhm.
the only standard for the way that we need to practice governance in this country is the Constitution. And I think that everybody needs to recognize that. And if they don't agree with it, well, they're always welcome to go somewhere else.
I agree. Do you believe, do you love America?
Yeah, I was never really proud to be an American for the longest time, just because of a lot of the leftist indoctrination. They want us to think that America's a terrible place to live in. And I'm like, well, if it's so terrible, then why does everybody want to live here? Why is everybody coming here? Why are people falling off of airplanes in Afghanistan in order to be able to live here and live a fruitful life of prosperity here? Why is that?
I agree 100%. I used to be on the left too and didn't even know it. So how much do you care about the Constitution?
In what way? What do you mean?
Do you think that we should stick with the original Constitution, or should we maybe like change certain things like freedom of speech or the Second Amendment with gun rights?
Well, the Constitution gives provision for a change in the form of an amendment, and we've done that multiple times. And so I think that we need to go through some sort of process, some sort of congressional legislation, some sort of methods of changing the Constitution if we see something inherently wrong with it. As far as the First and Second Amendments are concerned, I don't have a problem with them. And the reason I think the First Amendment is so important is because it allows us to discuss different ideas. And when you suppress different ideas and you make it so that people are not able to have their voices heard, that's what creates these ultra radical movements, and it harbors resentment, and people get really mad when they're not allowed to say what they want to say. And it's like that just opens it up so that we see their bad ideas. We're like, I don't agree with this. And that's the glory of living in America, is we have this whole melting pot of ideas to where people can believe what they want to believe. And if you don't like what they believe, well, you can not associate with them, or you can not give them a mouthpiece, So that's where I see the benefit in that. And then with the Second Amendment,
freedom of speech is very, very important. I don't even think people realize how important it is.
No. And as far as the Second Amendment's concerned, I think that that's the only thing that is keeping us from being overtaken by the government. And it's also a personal security. If they're talking about defunding the police, then what are we supposed to do to be able to defend ourselves? And in every totalitarian nation, the first things that they do in order to be able to take control in the country are they censor the press, they stifle the First Amendment, and then they disarm the citizens. So the First and Second Amendments, there's a reason why they're at the beginning of the Constitution. It's because they're the most important. If the first fails, you got the second, right? So I don't think people understand how important that is. And I think they use a lot of hyperbole and false flag events in order, like, for example, hate speech. They're like, oh, hate speech. Well, we need to restrict hate speech. I'm like, what is hate speech? It's just speech.
Well, that's the thing about the left. I always say the left does a better job marketing, because if you just hear hate speech and you don't really look into it, like, yeah, I don't want people to say hateful things. Or like when they attack the Second Amendment, the Democrats is like, we're going to get the guns off the street. Well, yeah, I don't want guns laying on the street for anybody to be able to pick them up. But it actually means we're going to take away the rights from law-abiding citizens to bear arms.
Absolutely.
So the Democrats, I feel like they're better than the Republicans when it comes to marketing their ideology.
Yeah, and the Democrats also have the upper hand when it comes to the culture war, because if you look, Hollywood, all the institutions, big tech, they're all controlled by leftists.
Especially when it comes to the blacks, because the leaders of the black community are LeBron James and Oprah Winfrey and Michelle Obama. And right. They're part of the global elite who really don't even have any idea what it's like to be a regular human being.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're so disconnected from reality that they think they can just, spout off these hashtags and these things that will, make people like them more in order to, curry favor with whatever cause it is that they're supporting.
What do you think about trans story hour that they're sending transgenders to elementary schools to read children books?
You know, here's the thing as far as transgenderism is concerned. I think that if you want to consider yourself a woman or a man or whatever, I think that you are fully able to do that. I think if you want to have surgery in order to alter your parts or whatever, you can do that. And I while you have that right, I also have the right to recognize biology and say, you are not a man, you are not a woman. I will extend you the same rights as a human being, but I don't have to endorse your delusion or your mental illness. But as far as the trans story hour is concerned, look, you can do what you like at age 18. When you become an adult, you may do what you like. But there's this insidious indoctrination within our youth, and I think that it's not the school's place to teach about these things. I think that public schools are slowly becoming overtaken by all the wokeists and all the leftists, and in order to get the children on board with these ideas, you got to get them early, and you got to start planting these seeds so that by the time they're older, these seeds have come to fruition, and they believe that transgenderism is infallible and it's 100% correct.
And it's a shame because I think as conservatives, I think I do a good job at pointing it out of what side is actually pushing this, because a lot of Black people, they don't know that it's actually the Democratic Party that's trying to push the LGBTQ agenda on the children. As far as I understand, no Republicans are in agreement with this kind of stuff.
Well, it's interesting because, I spent 5 years in Los Angeles, and I was really apolitical there. And it was only until I started meeting conservatives and right-leaning people that were not your stereotypical ones. Like, for example, I used to do like courier work and freelance work in order to kind of make some money. And I ended up talking for about half an hour with a guy who was a gay conservative. And I was like, a gay conservative? I was like, how does that work? And he was like, look, it's just a system of economics. It's not associated with any sort of religious ideology or thought. He's like, I run a business. Mm-hmm. I want lesser taxes on my business. I want smaller government in order for me to be able to prosper. And that was really kind of a paradigm shift for me. That's when I really started to understand that, hey, this is more all-inclusive and all-accepting than the left, who says our way or the highway.
Right.
And Milo Yiannopoulos, he recently had his conversion. He calls himself an ex-gay, but he was propagating ideas along the right for
Milo
quite
get
a long
a hard time. I know they'd be canceling him all the time, right?
Which is so funny because it's like he is everything that you should be embracing. He is in the LGBT community. He's also a Jew. He's he's everything that you would want, but because he doesn't believe what you want, well, then we have to stifle his views and his thoughts. And I'm like, this is bull. I was like, this is crazy.
So do you have a problem with like a gay pride parade?
No, I think that I have a problem with bringing children to them because, West Hollywood in Los Angeles, they have Pride Month, and they'll have pride parades basically every day of the month. And I hate to say it, but they're always in like BDSM gear and stuff that's completely inappropriate for children to be seeing. And so, again, this is a First Amendment expression. If you want to be able to do that, then you have that right. I don't have to agree with it or I don't have to endorse it. that, like I said, that's the glory of being in America, is the fact that, hey, we don't see eye to eye on this issue, but you go ahead and do what you want to do over here, and I'll go ahead and do what I want to do over here. And
It's more
so,
so they want to be proud of their sexuality, but they want society to also be proud of their sexuality as well.
and that's not society's responsibility. Like they can do what they like. That doesn't mean myself or anybody else has to accept it for that matter.
I agree. What about like a Black Pride parade?
Uh well, so you and I had kind of talked about some of this before, like as far as being prideful of your race or whatever. I I guess because I've never really had the experience of, being quote unquote a marginalized person or whatever. I've never felt the need to be prideful about my race, and I think in the 21st century, as far as racial pride is concerned, look, you didn't earn your race. You were just born that way. This is an immutable characteristic
Right.
that you just happen to be born to a Black person or a white person
Let me
or a
ask you,
Hispanic.
so do you think that Black people should be allowed to walk down the street and put the Black fist up and say Black power and the Black man is God and white people are the blue-eyed devil? Should Black people have the freedom to do that?
Sure, but I don't agree with it. Again, it's like Voltaire says, like, I don't agree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it.
Mhm.
So, because if we start placing restrictions on what other people can do or say, short of inciting violence or anything like that, well, then that becomes this litmus test in order to regulate speech. And that's something I don't agree with, because they could easily turn around and do something to Christians. They'll be like, we don't agree with your right to worship. So,
Well, what I noticed, a lot of Black people are racist, and I interviewed Black people before, and they have a whole different answer than what you gave me, because they believe that Black people should be allowed to be proud to be Black, but they don't believe that white people should have gatherings where they celebrate how the white man is great.
again, I don't agree with any sort of racial pride, but I'm not going to campaign or try to tell anybody otherwise that they can't be proud of their nationality, their race, their religion, anything like that. I think it's completely counterproductive.
Are you proud to be a white man?
Like I said, yeah, I didn't ask to be born white. I just was. And I was thinking about this the other day. I have Irish descent. I have Irish ancestry, and
So that's nothing but a white man, right?
well, I mean, according to some, yeah. I mean, uh, according, back in the day, back in history, the Irish were essentially second class citizens, slaves to the English,
Yeah.
and they went through an extensive slave trade in the West Indies and the Caribbean, and but every bone in my body said that because of my Irish heritage and my Irish ancestry, that I should hate English people. And you know what? I don't. I love English people. I love English culture. I love English literature, film. I love English music. The English are fantastic people. They are not responsible for the sins of their fathers. They're living how they're living now, and I didn't live in that era. I live in the present right now, and I think that is incredibly dangerous. Of course, we should know about history, but to be able to keep fixating on it and saying that, okay, well, this happened, and it's like, but what's happening now? What are we doing right now? It's like Yoda says,
Yeah.
never his mind on where he was. So
Who created the best country on this side of heaven? The white men or Black people?
well, that's kind of a loaded question. I think that this country was made by many different races, and different ethnicities, nationalities, religious folks.
What
Originally,
color?
this
What color was the people that laid down the foundation of the country?
um, in what way? What do you mean?
It was the straight white man that created the Constitution, that created the freest country in the planet, and that was done by white men.
Hmm.
So the thing is, don't you believe that we should have a White History Month?
I mean, no. I think that
But we got everything else. We got Gay Month, we got Mexican Month, Black Month, everything but White History Month.
let me put it to you this way: from being from being with the Hare Krishnas, one of the things that I learned was, you are not this body. You are just the soul within the body. And having that bodily identification and constantly fixating on that is just one of the reasons that division exists in this country, because we're always trying to find these things that separate us and segregate us into different groups, whether we do it intentionally or not. And I
Do you
like
think
I said,
that the blacks are wrong for turning their color into a religion?
what do you mean by that?
Black people don't see logic, they just see blackness. That means that if you go towards a cop with a knife, the cop should do a karate move and take you to prison nice and clean. But in the case in like what happened in Ohio with I think her name is I forget the girl name, but she was about to stab another girl, Ma'Khia Bryant.
Oh, Ma'Khia Bryant, yeah.
She tried to stab another girl when a police showed up and tried to shoot and shot Ma'Khia Bryant and saved the life of another black woman. And what happened was black people said that cop was wrong, even though everybody could clearly see that the cop was in the right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that come. I'll tell you what I think. I don't think that comes from any sort of. I think the race part is definitely part of it, but I think it's this whole leftist narrative where it's these neo-Marxist ideas of oppressor versus oppressed, and the left has sort of hijacked these racial justice groups and struggles for racial equality and put all these Marxist layers underneath them, and it really doesn't matter. It's like white versus black, white versus Latino, white versus whatever. But within Marxism, it's proletariat, or excuse me, bourgeoisie versus proletariat. The ruling class and those that are ruled. So I think that's inherently what is below the surface, and most people don't look at it. They just say this is about race, and it's like, no, it's really not. I mean, as far as people making their race their religion, I'm of the belief, like the libertarian belief, like, look, let's laissez-faire, like live and let live. If you guys want to do that, that's fine, but I also have the right to push back against that.
Okay, man. So I don't know if you ever heard of this racist Marxist terrorist organization. It's called Black Lives Matter. You ever hear of them?
No, I'm not familiar with them. Yeah, definitely.
What is your view on Black Lives Matter? Are you a supporter?
All right. So the name itself, Black Lives Matter, it always comes from, it's like a loaded question right there, because the name of the organization, Black Lives Matter, I think most people in the United States would agree that Black Lives Matter. And so when you say you actually disagree with the organization Black Lives Matter, they're like, what, you don't think Black Lives Matter? And it's like, no, obviously Black Lives Matter. Obviously, and this is a controversial statement, all lives matter, And so for us to keep differentiating between races, I don't think it's racist to say all lives matter. It's just the organization itself fundamentally is they're a Marxist organization. Their founders have come out and said it. Patrice Khan-Coolers, she has said that they were trained Marxists. And like I was mentioning earlier, they operate on this platform of oppressor versus oppressed class. That's how Marxism is, like I said, with the proletariat, the bourgeoisie. And so that's what they use to, this is kind of a funny word, but that's what they use to capitalize on, people's emotions, people's their donations, their pocketbooks. And so I fundamentally disagree with the organization itself. They've even used a Marxist fist as their little branding item. And being in LA, I noticed so many people would have that in their businesses and their, on their storefronts. And they were like, we're showing solidarity with Black Lives Matter. I'm like, do you know the origin of this symbol right here? Do you have any idea where this comes from?
Did you know Black Lives Matter is actually part of LGBTQ culture?
Aside from the fact that the founders are I know LGBT
Have you ever
affiliated.
looked on their website? It actually talks about like transgender rights, and it talks about LGBTQ, and it talks about taking masculinity out of the home, and
oh yeah, they were advocating
a nuclear family and stuff like that.
That's what they were advocating. And like I said, the only association I knew with it was the fact that the founders were lesbians. I didn't know whether or not they were actually advocating. I wouldn't be surprised.
So when you actually look at their website, it has nothing to do with protecting Black people at all. It's like in support of like abortion and Planned Parenthood rights, and it's like, what does this have to do with Black lives?
It doesn't.
And they only care about Black lives if it just so happened you get killed by a white man, or in particular a white cop.
Well, a lot of people don't understand that the BLM movement was funneling a lot of the funds that they were raising to the DNC. And some people speculate that George Soros is actually pulling the strings. And so it completely makes sense if you look at it from a eugenics perspective. Like, they are so on to Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger. And most people don't understand that Margaret Sanger was a racist, and that many of the policies that she was pushing were detriments to the Black community, because the abortion rates within the Black community are some of the highest in the country. And so it only makes sense to, if you're trying to achieve some sort of goal, to say, hey, this is a good thing. This is actually a good thing. Oh, okay, yeah, let's do this. And they're like, ha ha ha, I tricked them.
Black Lives Matter is a hustle. I mean, the leader of it, Patrice Cullors, she was buying property all around the country. Meanwhile, she didn't give the family of George Floyd any money. She didn't give Michael Brown family any money. Like, all of the Black victims that was killed by white people, that they hustled their death for money, for their own personal gain. They didn't build one institution for Black people, not one hospital, not one school. So what does Black Lives Matter? Does it have one positive thing about it?
That's a very good question. I mean, I think that
it's a political group.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're extremely well organized, and they are definitely playing on the emotions. I'll tell you, I think Black Lives Matter is more a white liberal organization than it is a Black one.
It's the same thing as Antifa.
Yeah, I think that more of the people that have been advocating for BLM are virtue signaling white folks. And I find that to be so cringy, because I'm like, what do you know about the Black experience? Like, what do you who have been raised, in generally pretty privileged circumstances. Not equating that to white privilege, because I don't believe in that. But, they're sitting there saying like Black people are victims and whatnot. And it's like, I've spoken with many of my Black friends, and they're like, no, we're not victims. We have personal agency in our lives, and we're capable of making our own decisions and succeeding in this country. And so I think it's incredibly irresponsible and just wrong for all these white liberals to be advocating for the BLM movement.
Well, they bully white people into supporting BLM, because if you don't support it, then you're a white supremacist, racist Klan member.
Yeah, and
it's kind of like the same thing they did. Like, if you disagree with anything what Obama did, you're racist.
Right, and that's where white folks and people in general need to understand, look, this whole bullying and throwing of ad hominems of people of being a racist and a bigot.
Hmm.
I've had that happen so much since shifting on the political spectrum towards the right. I've had a lot of so-called friends that have said, well, you're a racist, you're a bigot. And to be perfectly honest with you, as a white person, when you hear that, you've automatically won the argument, because there's nothing that they can bring to be able to defend their position. So they just start insulting you and giving you crap for, the facts and logic.
Well,
and
black
they don't
people,
like it.
yeah, black people make up all kinds of stuff. It's kind of like if you got a black friend, they'll say, that doesn't mean you're not racist. And I'm just like, white people should say, it absolutely mean I'm not racist. I just don't like you.
Well, like people have said that to me. It's like, look, with my channel, the one of my friends, he was born in Kenya and he
Yeah.
became a naturalized U.S. citizen. I'm like, yeah, that's one of my really good friends. They're like, oh, well, that's what every racist would say. And I'm like, well, if I have friends that are of every ethnicity, I must be a really terrible racist, because I respect those individuals for whom they are as people and their talents and their skills and how they treat other people. I don't look at immutable characteristics, and I don't try to say, white person, black person, Latin person. Like it just doesn't make any sense to me.
We live in a society where white people can't just be a-holes. They have to be racist white supremacists.
Yeah, and honestly, I think the only people that believe in white supremacy are white supremacists.
You know what the funny thing about the whole white supremacist is? I can't necessarily say white supremacists believe in it, because I never hear white people going around talking about, I'm a white supremacist, I'm superior. I always hear black people calling them superior and supremacist. I never hear white people saying that. I mean, in the movies, of course, but
Yeah,
in real world, like in reality, I don't hear white people talking about, I have white privilege, I'm superior.
the fact that Christopher Wray, the FBI director, said that white supremacy was the biggest threat that was facing our nation.
Joe
For
Biden
one,
did that too.
right. And it's funny because he was buddy with many avowed white supremacists back in the day. And so for one, that's a deflection. One, that is a smokescreen to be able to kind of re-divert our focus into efforts that really don't have as much of a threat to our country as they say they do. Two, like you take a look at white supremacist organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, right? I think they only have like less than 10,000 members in this country or something like that. I mean, they do not have the reach and the grasp that they did in, antebellum South and in like the 20s, whenever the, Woodrow Wilson was inviting the Klan to the White House, and they were showing Birth of a Nation there, and the Klan was marching up and down the streets in Washington. It's a very fringe organization, and they are, but a blip on the radar of any sort of threat against this nation. And, and see that's it's just a BS like argument, because once you got them as far as debating them or making any sort of argument, and they say that, a lot of white people will fold, because nobody wants to be called a racist. Like, well, I'm not a racist. Am I a racist? Am I? And so to be able to, do you know who MAGA Hulk is?
No.
Oh, okay. He goes to a bunch of the rallies. I met him a few times in Beverly Hills. He's like an internet personality, and he put out a video. His name's Steven. I can't think of his last name, but he put out a video and was saying, like, look, people are going to call you racist. Don't believe them. You're not a racist for stating obvious facts,
I always
and
tell
that's
white people they shouldn't be afraid to be called a racist. Who cares?
you should.
Racism is somebody's opinion about you. There's no blood type they could draw from you to prove that you're a racist.
Right. And if you're not a racist, then what does it matter? Just don't even give those people the time of day. Like I used to work at a bunch of clubs in Hollywood. I used to work the door, and sometimes I wouldn't let people in, and it wasn't always on the basis of race. Like if you weren't dressed properly, didn't matter what color you were, I wouldn't let you in. And that wasn't my decision. That was the decision of the club. And I got called a racist a few times, and I'm like, dude, I would say that to any person. I would say that if you were, white, black, Latin, whatever. Like, if you're wearing sandals, you can't come into this club. I'm sorry,
Right.
So
What exactly is white privilege?
non-existent.
That's a good answer for that. Yeah, I don't believe in that neither. Should white people today feel guilty about slavery?
Well, I think, like I was saying, history is important, and I think we should understand factors in this nation that we can attribute to slavery. Like, why was slavery an institution in our country for the longest time? But again,
You ever hear black people talk about the black man as God and we're God original people?
don't the
That's like the
what are they?
Nation of Islam, I think,
I
as
was gonna
well.
say the guys in Wu Tang. What do they call them? Like the 5%ers or whatever? Don't
Yeah.
they believe like something like that?
Well, a lot of different black groups like to brag about how the black man is God and the black man is the first man and all of this stuff. I always wonder, should you know, should black people be upset about 400 years of slavery, or should they be upset about black people enslaving other black people and Caucasian people of descent for 3,000 years of slavery?
Um, well, as far as modern day folks, I don't think anyone needs to be upset about it,
I agree.
because slavery is not mutually exclusive to any race. Like, you look in the Bible, the Jews were enslaved. They were
Right.
enslaved by everybody. And
During the
so,
time, during the time in the 18th century when there was black African slaves in America, there was actually more Caucasian slaves in Northern Africa enslaved by African people.
right, Barbary slave trade. Yeah, there was like 2.2 million white European Christians that were enslaved by the North Africans. Yeah, history will never tell you that. And I just think it's interesting because we've got this really warped view on the history of slavery in the world.
Mhm.
And, like the left will never tell you that. They'll never mention that to you. And it's because they've got a narrative to push. Again, it's tainted by neo-Marxism,
Right.
and they need that oppressor and oppressive class and oppressed class. And so when you introduce information that would dispel their narrative, they're like, it does not compute, and they get
Mhm.
angry and like their brain overloads.
I think if we was taught the full context of what slavery actually was, nobody would be upset about it, because you think about it, mankind was barbarians for the longest period of time. It was Vikings invading countries, killing, raping, stealing. The pirates, which, in movies, pirates are portrayed to be like white Anglo-Saxon people, but
Johnny
majority of
Depp.
pirates was actually people of color from like the Middle East and Africa. They was the pirates, and they went around
Right.
invading people countries, stealing gold, raping, killing, stealing,
The
all kinds of stuff.
the first time that the United States flag was hoisted on foreign soil was in the Battle of Tripoli, whenever the U.S. Marines went over and they fought the Barbary pirates, and they defeated them and raised the flag over there. And yeah, they were not white; they were of North African descent.
Right. And let me ask you, can white people solve black people problems?
So I think the only way that problems can be solved is you. Like, you are the one that has to solve your own
Mhm.
problems. That was a game changer for me when I hit like my early mid 30s. Before I used to blame everybody, like, oh, it's these people's fault that I'm not successful, or because, and again, that's not exclusive to
Well,
black folks
I
either.
think that's what separate Democrats from Republicans. Democrats believe that the government should come in and solve your problems, and Republicans believe that you're responsible to solve your own problems. So it's
Absolutely.
dependency versus independency.
Yeah, I mean, the federal government is not supposed to have as much control as it has. I mean, back in the days of early America, it was meant to maintain a standing army and levy taxes within the colonies. The real representation is supposed to be at state level, and even further, the local level, the grassroots level. And so, if you want to talk about like charity and
Mhm.
providing for people, you as a believer understand that, like, you know, the church is supposed to be altruistic, because this is what the left believes. The left thinks that charity and philanthropy and altruism needs to come from the government. It's essentially like a church without God, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what they're using to be able to fill that void, is they're saying the state is responsible for this, the state is responsible for this. And it's like, no, it's not, because everybody's tax dollars are allocated to any sort of social programs and whatnot, when in reality, we need to be helping people at the community level, you know, like churches, you know, anything that would not be under the purview of government,
Exactly.
you know, Jewish temples, synagogues. And yeah, the Democrats refuse to take any sort of personal responsibility. And, you know, that, like I said, that was a game changer for me when I learned to start being responsible for my own mistakes and my own shortcomings. I felt a lot better. I felt like this huge weight was lifted off my shoulders, and that, hey, I'm responsible for where I'm at in my life. And it's a beautiful thing when you can realize that.
What's your opinion on defunding the police?
I think it's a terrible idea. You know, I saw that video here recently where they were protesting against the police and then throwing objects at people's cars. And then one of the guys got out of the cars and started coming after the people. They're like, oh, call the police, call the police. And it's like, whoops, you kind of messed up there.
Well,
and
defund the police is also part of the whole BLM movement as well.
Oh, no doubt. Which is unfortunate, because most of the communities that need it are the Black communities. And I think they did a poll of the Black communities. They said 80% of the people there did not want to defund the police. And I'm like, yeah, no kidding. Like, this is terrible. And all these advocates of defunding the police, like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, AOC, all the squad people, they've all got private security. They, and that comes from taxpayer dollars.
What is Cori Bush?
Right?
Yeah. She basically was saying that, yeah, if I need $10 more or $200,000 more to protect me, then we need to do that. But we got to defund the police from the average people.
Yeah.
And she openly said it. People won't even believe it, you know?
Well, because they don't see it. That's the biggest problem, is that, you know, big tech censorship, most of these ideas and these politicians saying these things that would be completely counter to what they're preaching don't even get out into the ether. And so most people just don't know about these things. And the average human being is not going to go and sift through all these information sources like you and I will. They're just going to be complacent and be like, what do I watch on Netflix next? You know, what, you know, dumb show is going to be able to, you know, satiate my mind and keep me removed from all these events that are going on in the world. So they don't even see anything that all these insane, idiotic politicians are saying. And so that I don't know that they're necessarily to blame.
Will Joe Biden complete his 4 years?
God, we're only less than a year in, and look where we're at right now, you know? I mean, I think it's always kind of been part of the plan. Am I allowed to say this? I don't want to get you the platform or anything. So, you know, I always think it's been part of the plan to remove him by use of the 25th Amendment. I think that I personally think that Harris is kind of running the show. If you notice in videos, whenever Joe Biden is speaking, Harris is always right there next to him. She's like some sort of like evil henchman, like, yes, you know?
Yeah.
And like, that has never been done in history. That the president and the vice president are rarely in the same room together. Rarely, because it poses a huge security risk. You know, imagine somebody just throws a bomb in there. Well, then the president and the vice president are taken out. And so, do I think he's going to be removed? I will say I think it's great that the leftist media is finally doing their job and putting Joe Biden to task with his horrible foreign policy decisions.
Yeah.
And so
holding him accountable. And
I put this question out on social media today. I said, left the left is awfully quiet about what's going on in Afghanistan right now. And I think they're starting to see what a terrible decision they made. I think that now that CNN and MSNBC and all these, leftist news outlets, New York Times, Washington Post, now that they're not running cover for Joe Biden, the people, the low information folks that, maybe turn on CNN every once in a while, they're going to start to see this. And you know how easily led they are. They're going to be like, oh yeah, Joe Biden, terrible idea. Yeah. And so that's going to increase this political fervor, and they're going to, I think that he's a strong contender for the 25th Amendment. He won't get reelected. They will definitely not put him up for reelection. That's for sure.
And it's a shame that they're going to use Kamala Harris, because nobody even cared about her in the primary. She did horrible.
She was the least popular of all the candidates that were running in the Democratic primaries. One of the most popular was Tulsi Gabbard. And I happen to really like Tulsi Gabbard a lot, because I think she
was the one who called Kamala Harris out on her BS.
Yeah, exactly. And she, you look, this was another reason that I grew disillusioned with the Democrat Party. Like in the 2016 primaries, I voted for Bernie Sanders, and they kind of threw him to the wolves. The Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the chair of the DNC, they wanted Hillary. They said, we're going to put Hillary in. And Hillary was clearly not as popular as Bernie Sanders. I personally think that had Bernie Sanders had the Democrat nomination, that I think he would have beat Trump. And most people disagree with me on that, or it would have been very, very close.
Yeah, I think Bernie beat Hillary.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
he got treated real unfair.
Yeah, and I think that, the grassroots movement that Bernie really kind of helped to.
But he was like a socialist, so I'm kind of happy that it wasn't him.
Right, but I guess the point I was trying to make was the fact that
for everybody and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Right. The point I was trying to make was the fact that he was the more popular candidate, and they threw him under the bus. And then the same with Tulsi Gabbard. Like, well, what are we supposed to do? Like the people, the candidate that the people want is being led to slaughter, and they're putting up these crony, establishment politicians in their place, because they're going to do what they want them to do. That's why Trump was so successful, is he ran outside their circle and they didn't like it.
Can you give me your top 3 greatest men of all time?
Top 3 greatest men.
Dead or alive?
That's a really tough question. I would say, can I do 4?
Okay, sure.
Okay. Peter Venkman, Ray Stantz, Egon Spengler, and Winston Zeddemore.
Okay, that was pretty quick.
I'm kidding. I was trying to think of trios and whatnot, and I was like, no, I can't. I have to do 4. But top 3. I mean, as far as like political, or who have been influential on me, or
in your life, who impacted you the most?
Oh, I mean, definitely my father. I have kind of emulated him in the way that I interact with the world, because my dad just kind of tells it like it is. He just he's a straight shooter, and he doesn't really care what anybody thinks about him.
Nice.
And so I kind of embrace that. And, he's been a great mentor and supporter of me, which is awesome. I have a spiritual teacher in the Hare Krishnas. He has been very merciful to me. His name's His Holiness Bhakti Marg Swami. He's been fantastic. And third, I mean, my relationship with God, I mean, I know that's going to kind of sound cliche, but, because everybody's like, oh, it's like you're at
well, you can name like Jesus, because he was actually a man who walked the earth, right?
Sure. Like, it's like you're accepting a Grammy or something, though. It's like, I'd like to thank God, and I'd like to thank my mom, but I mean, like I said, I have a really interesting relationship with Christianity right now. I'm kind of like exploring and discovering, and
so you're gonna go with God for your last one, right?
Sure. Well, but I mean, from a Christian's perspective, if you look at it like Jesus is God,
Hmm.
you know, and God is the Trinity, you know, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So
Well,
they're
Jesus is
all
the Son of God.
sure. Yeah,
I know
definitely.
some people relate the same as one,
You know, I was really influenced by filmmakers too, because I, you know, come from a Hollywood career,
Hmm.
and I you know, I love the works of Stanley Kubrick. I love you know, I love Akira Kurosawa.
Right.
I love Werner Fassbinder, all sorts of directors. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so many. I don't know if I could name just three, but those are some big ones.
Maybe George Washington, right? He would be a good one.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
William George
as far as like
Washington then.
political influences to me, I definitely started reading Ayn Rand a lot.
Okay.
I really love Ayn Rand. Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell
Thomas Sowell is
is
great. He's still
dude
kicking,
like,
man. He's like 90 something.
and he's still sharp and
He's still
spry. You
sharp,
know,
sharper than Joe,
he
right?
anybody's sharper than Joe. And you know, we were talking about Larry Elder earlier.
Larry
The
Elder, yeah.
man, I watched his interview that he did with Dave Rubin on the Rubin
Hmm.
Report a while back, and that was kind of when I was really at an impasse as far as my political opinions and perspectives. And you know, he converted Dave Rubin to the right, and I was just sitting there listening to him, and just all the ideas he was saying were like, wow, this is a black man talking about these things. This is
Right.
crazy. And
We
then the
love
more
Larry.
he's, you know, he is the best possible candidate for governor in North Carolina.
Absolutely.
Gavin Newsom is
Or
he's
Bruce
a
Gender, right?
tyrant. Bruce Gender, yeah. He you know, he's a complete tyrant, and he absolutely needs to be
It's going to be
deposed.
crazy because I think California will go to the right and go for Larry Elder. I believe he will be the candidate. But let me ask you, because of time, is there anything you wanted to ask me?
Is there anything I want to ask you? So you had a political shift, and that was rather recently.
Um, I was for Trump 100% the whole time.
Even
So
in even in 2016.
yeah, yeah, I would
Okay.
say like 2014, 2013 ish, when I was listening to like Bill O'Reilly on Fox News, and he was and Megyn Kelly, and they was breaking down like racial relations in America and making sense out of everything, like doing the whole like Trayvon Martin thing. And I was just hearing different people perspective, um, and it just kind of changed me.
That's awesome. Yeah, I guess a question would be, how do your friends treat you? Like, how do people within the black community treat you, having like counter
Well, you know what it is?
opinions to?
They was all fine until I started an actual YouTube channel. They disagreed with me, but once I started a YouTube channel, they don't talk to me no more.
They don't want to see you coming up, man.
Yeah, they completely disagree. They hate the white. Most black people are racist anyway. And black people are the most racist people. I don't know if you ever looked at my video where I broke that down.
I did. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I don't know, because I don't come from that experience.
Yeah.
I don't think that I don't think that racism is exclusive to any one race. I had a disagreement with one of my black friends. He was saying that black people can't be racist. I'm like, dude, that's
Oh yeah, that's
absurd.
another thing. That's
I was
another
like, that
thing.
is absurd. You know, I said anybody can be racist. Any race can
Exactly.
be racist. You know, and they they updated the definition of racism in Merriam-Webster,
I
saying
heard
that it
about
was,
that.
yeah, saying that it was systemically based, and that, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
because the systems that are in place in this country were instituted by white folks,
They
that,
make it
you
so a
know,
white man can't win an argument no matter what.
right.
Um,
And the funny thing is about that whole Merriam-Webster amendment was that it was a high school student that went and complained to Merriam-Webster, and they were just like, "Oh, you know what? You're right."
it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Hey man, but you got a growing channel. I'm a growing channel. I want you to come back on, and I want you to invite me on your show.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I'm working on getting this whole format going. So, yeah, I'd love to have you on, man. It'd be great. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
man, definitely, man. I appreciate that, man. So before we go, tell everybody how to find you, say your name, all of that.
Cool. Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at T and Effery. You know the word here. Wait,
Yeah.
I don't want to say it because
Yeah.
I don't want to get flagged. But yeah, you can find me on YouTube. I'm on every sort of social media outlet under TF Media Group, and I'll post a comment here in the YouTube channel, and it'll show you all that. I got a store on Etsy under TF Media Group. I got a bunch of different merch there. You can follow me on Instagram, TF Media Group, and I think that's everywhere I'm at yet. Coming soon to to be a Fox News commentator near you.
Okay.
No, I
Okay.
wish.
Well,
No,
all right. Yeah. Cool,
I just
man.
I want to be there with like Dana Perino and Emily
Oh, yeah.
Compagno and
Eventually.
Kaylee McEnany.
Well,
Ooh,
you might want to change your
I would
YouTube name, right?
I would never be late to work. No, and see that's the thing. Like everybody's like, you might want to change your YouTube name, and it's like I grew up in the hardcore and punk rock scene, and
Yeah.
like this is me. Like take me
Hey,
as I am, you know.
I
So
agree. I agree, man. Hey,
yeah,
man.
man,
But thanks for coming on, man. I'll talk to you off of the camera.
dude, I appreciate you.
All right. Peace.
Namaste. Be good.